Who's live? So,
Helps to unmute.
How about now? You all good?
It's very low in the room, the audio. We'll try to speak a bit, see if it gets
Sure.
better.
Okay. I will talk louder and wake the rest of the house. That's fine with me. How about now? Is this better?
Yes, it's very good. For
Okay.
me, anyway.
Great. All right. Shall we get started, or you want to wait a couple more minutes?
I'm ready whenever you are. Francesca?
All right. I'll be doing the slides. Daryl will be doing the content. Francesca is our local rep. Okay. Welcome to the HTTP API. By now, you should be. Many people will be familiar with the eye chart here. Note well, it is a set of references to intellectual property, harassment, online conduct, and so on. If you haven't read it, when you signed up, you should have gotten a pointer to it, so we'll assume everybody has read it. Please be nice, respectful, and professional and kind to each other. In case you haven't learned, this meeting is being recorded. The tips by now are we only have a day and a half left. Everybody should be signed in via MeetEcho. Apparently, there is a QR code. You can sign in if you're one of the dozen or so people in the room. Links some other resources. Again, late in the week, this should not be new information. Although I guess our group is a little different in that we have people who are not full regular IETF attendees. So it might be useful. This is all in the chair slides file in the GitHub repository. It's also on the data tracker. Agenda. Okay, so first part, administration. We need one or two people to volunteer to take minutes. That can be done in the CodeMD Edge doc. Do we have any volunteers? I will also be online doing it. You have to sign in, which I'm about to do. Anybody else?
We got Martin and Mark in the chat volunteering.
Great, thank you, people. Yeah, when you're showing slides, you can't see stuff. Great, thank you, gentlemen. All right. We have some presentation. Oh, any other changes to the rest of the agenda people want to talk about? We have presentations on the current documents, some status updates, and then there's a couple proposals to bring new documents into the working group. Daryl, Mark, Francesca, and I talked about increasing the bandwidth of the group since we seem to have our feet under us. We know what we're doing, even if it is at times frustrating for some of the authors. We'll talk to that. And then finally, any other business. Twitter bot, if there's time, Daryl could show the GitHub project board, which is very impressive. Anybody have anything else they'd like to put on the agenda? Okay. That's it on the chair slides. Daryl, which Friso you want me to bring up next?
Well, probably be a good idea just to go in the order. So if we start with the rate limit headers,
Okay.
Roberto, are you ready? I see
Hello,
you come.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. We will start with HTTP API rate limit. Can I share the screen?
Rich,
you want-
your slide deck.
I have the slides. If you want to share the screen, I can.
Okay, whichever you prefer.
Happy to let you do it. We'll request to share the screen. I will stop
Okay.
the slide.
So, rate limit headers, we made, we already done. We're almost done with this specification. There have been some changes. Well, the goal of the specification is to communicate service limits so clients cannot stop before being throttled out, can stop before being throttled out, align all the already existing rate limit headers. So we are not inventing anything new. We are just trying to standardize something that is already existing or an already existing practice. And we want to express multiple rate limiting policies. So we want to stop header proliferation. We are the current setup is that we have three fields. The rate limit that is a structured field list now, as rate limit remaining and rate limit reset that are structured fields integers. One providing the number of units remaining to be consumed, and the last one are delta seconds, just like retry after. So this is the current setup with structured fields before were implemented in this version. So we have three integers, buried items, and then in the case of rate limit, we have optional values conveying the quota. So the technical choices are to support only delta seconds, just like retry after. This avoids issues with NTP skew and adjustment issues. And now we support structured fields. There is a flexible semantic, and we don't mention infrastructural concepts like connection. Changes from the previous version are that now we are using structured fields. This may need some editorial rework to align with the latest way of expressing structured fields, the latest prose that is going to be used in HTTP extensions documents. We resolved the field dependencies. So after a long discussion, we state that rate limit, and reset are required, while rate limit remaining is recommended. And we fix another issue saying that throttling scope is eventually delegated to parameters that can be further registered in a IANA table. Martin, the fact that those fields are required means that if you want to be interoperable with respect to this specification, you always need to reply with those fields. So we are not saying that all HTTP server must implement this specification, but if you implement this specification, since the goal is interoperability between servers and clients will expect those fields to be present to enable actions. So, open issue needing input. The first is we had some requests from users to separate quota policies from expiring limits. And me and Alex, the other editor, are supportive of these changes. This because some implementers say that they prefer to separate those information because it's much simpler to implement the behavior. The arrow is should be credited to Lucas Pardue that invented this this arrow. The second open issue is: do we want to define an upper bound for rate limit reset or not? Since it's a delta second, maybe we could suggest to implementer that if they receive a incredibly huge number on this rate limit reset, probably they shouldn't wait all that time, and maybe those rate limit resets should be either ignored or interpreted in another way. And there was a last open issue about field names. Me and Alex discussed this a lot. Alex is one of the editors and is one of the leading engineer from the Red Hat API gateway that implements with Kong and Envoy proxy this specification. And our opinion is that we shouldn't modify the field names because we adopted field names that were very similar to the one API gateways are using now, and we think that we should stick with those names because those names are something that is already used. Well, to split quota policies means that instead of having I'm moving on, but so the quota policies now is that the rate limit is a structure field list, while we've been asked to have two fields. One with rate limit that only contains the first field of the list, the expiring limit, and the second one containing all the other quota policy information. We have been suggested that this is easier to parse, avoids confusion between the expiring limit and the quota policies, and moreover, in this case, all the list items have the same structure. So I think this is a reasonable idea. What we'll have then is that rate limit, remaining, and reset are just three bare integers, and the optional part is in another field, the rate limit policies, containing the old quota policies, and this is the only field that support parameters. So probably this is the principal question, and we want to ask the opinion of the work group on this splitting part. We think this is reasonable because it's apple with apple and oranges with oranges, while in the previously we had different meaning for the first list item and the other ones. And the rest, if we want to discuss the other policies, the other
Roberto,
issues, I'm open, but
we have Mark in the queue. Do you want to take questions now, or do you want to wait till the end after you've gone through all the
almost
slides?
I'm finished actually.
Okay.
Because this was the core issue. The other can be discussed further after the work group plus call. But if we close this, we will make the pull request, and then we hope to make a work group plus call.
So I'll hand it over to you, Mark.
Working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Technology is wonderful. Hello. So to me, this seems like we're seeing this proliferation of fields, and it seems like it's quite verbose. Sometimes it's a good idea to split out data into multiple fields, especially when it changes at different rates. But it seems like like the remaining and the reset are pretty dynamic as far as I'm aware, whereas the policy and the limit are not. So I can't help but wonder, and this is maybe related to issue 65 as well. I can't help but wonder, have we tried to combine all this information into one field, like a dictionary, and use clear dictionary labels to clarify the relationship? Because it's all fairly tightly coupled, it seems to me. I was just wondering if the editors have considered that.
We did, but the point is that this is what is already used by everyone on the internet. This is what everybody does. And
that paving cow paths is a good strategy sometimes, but I don't think we should be bound by it. I think that developers, with a clear specification and a clear direction forward, can change. We're already changing the names of the fields that they're using. I found the reasoning for issue 65 quite thin on that basis, that if we don't have it starting with the words rate limit, they won't understand it, seems to be the reasoning there. So I think that if we come up with a well-reasoned design, we don't have to be too bound by precedent there. And I'd encourage you to at least explore those directions.
Thanks, Mark. We actually did, talking with implementers. There's not, after our investigation, it seems that implementers not only are not willing to change this layout, but when we try to conflate policy and limit, they expressly provide feedback in splitting them. So maybe I wouldn't. It wouldn't be useful to create a cool specification that implementers are not willing to use. That's it. At least this is the feedback we have.
Okay, I would love to probe that a bit more, because it sounds somewhat thin to me. That the implementers want to see it spelled in a particular way in particular headers in the wire, otherwise they're never going to use it. That seems a bit odd to me.
Martin's joined the queue. Martin.
So I tend to agree with Mark here. I think the efficiency advantages that you get from having a single field sort of far outweigh the advantages of having simple, unique fields that you can pull out with single integers. It's the assumption here is that we're using structured fields for parsing these things out, and my guess is that those implementers who would rather we didn't put all things together are not using structured fields to do their parsing, which is probably okay, maybe if you're just using a simple integer field, but these things can be parameterized, and there's no guarantee that they won't be. And so I tend to think that pushing them towards a dictionary would be pretty straightforward. The dynamism aspects of that can be pretty well addressed with header compression, and I think it's much more compact and concise to have a single rate limit thing that sort of says, well, here's one parameter, one pair of values, here's the limit, here's the reset, here's the remaining, and I don't know how to express a policy, but I'm sure we can work something out.
Thanks, Martin.
Does anybody have questions on other parts of this presentation?
Hey, this is Rich. So I'll mention that in the Oblivious to HTTPA group, the idea came up, and I don't know if the people there have reached out to you or your authors, co-author Robert. The idea that, so in OHI, great name, there's an intermediate proxy between the end user and the client and the origin server, and that obfuscates enough information, and it gets obfuscated information so it can't tell what the request is, and it sends it on to the origin. And there seems to be a need for having that intermediate and the origin collaborate to do rate limiting one way or another. And so they might be coming here, or they might be looking at your draft as a way to reuse some of it and probably adding some kind of indicator saying this is related to the origin, or this is related to the proxy, or this should go back to the user, whoever they are, saying you're doing too many requests of this kind. The proxy has no idea what the requests are, but it can be it can tell the client, stop asking for every single picture in the phone book. So I think it's mainly just a heads up that OHI needs a similar kind of thing. It's different in that there's multiple parties, and they'll need to be able to address where the limits are intended. It might just be as simple as adding a new field indicating which party the limits are and quotas are for. That's all, just a heads up.
Frank, this is interesting, and probably we should file an issue to understand better the use case and possible exchanges. In general, I understand the suggestion of reducing the number of fields, but please consider that the actual feedback of many implementers is that they say in the rate limit policy that they don't even want to conflate all those information in the same field, and they prefer to say, for example, rate limit minute, rate limit hour, different things. I don't know if this is because they implement this at different layers, so they have different proxies or different intermediator that provides each different time frame. No, I'm not using. I'm not. I'm not trying to avoid using structured field parser, but I'm building the specification for implementers, and my goal is not forcing them to do something they don't want to do, but is avoiding they to provide the same information in different fields. I'm not, trying to interpret what they their goals. I'm trying to make them use the same field name for sending the same information.
Mark is back in the queue. Mark, go ahead.
Working? Is it working?
Yes.
It seems to be working. Okay. So Roberto, I think it's great that you're going out and engaging with folks who are using, similar things out there. And I mean, potential implementers, I think there's maybe a mix there. I'm not sure. But generally, when we do that, it's great, but it's important to make sure that we're doing that to bring back their feedback in the form of arguments, not just preferences. It's much more convincing if you came back and said implementers want to do this, and there's this technical or this reason why that we can understand and take into account in our discussions. But it's less useful when they come back and say they want to, or they prefer this, or they prefer that. I'm much less willing to be convinced that that's a good reason to choose any particular design in the discussions for a standard.
Mark, you're right, but the problem is to find something that matches that can be accepted by the implementers.
Part of the challenge of writing standards, yes. I think we're maybe we have different calibrations on what will work there.
Bron?
Hello, is this working? Yep, this is Bron Gondwana. I wanted to add something in favor of the idea that something that people want to use has value in itself, not just because of the technical arguments, but because they enjoy using it and hence they're more likely to use it. We're competing against someone can throw whatever they like in the header. If we're offering them a standard that's a pain to use and looks ugly and they don't like, then they just won't use it. So I think the operators prefer this is a significant, or users prefer this is sufficient argument in itself. It doesn't have to be, it's technically the best and they have made a compelling argument for why it's right. Just they would prefer it is a pretty strong argument.
Eric?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is Eric. So I just wanted to point out that maybe sometimes we also have a different view on the people we're designing for. I think, and I really don't mean this in a negative way, but I think Mark has a perspective that is a lot on people who are very professionally working with HTTP and HTTP header fields and so forth, because that is the core of what they're working with. And for those, I would assume they should and probably will be much more willing to adapt to technologies like structured fields and make sure they understand what it means and how they can use it and use a library and so forth. But I think in the API space, really in the end, what you end up with is you end up with a lot of developers who are not core HTTP developers, who are using HTTP as part of the work they need to get done. And if you tell them that they have to use an additional parser and that they're rather complex header fields to work with and all of this, I think it's just a different kind of client base we're working with here. So I just think we should take into account that from an HTTP API perspective, for most people, they're not HTTP experts. So for them, HTTP is just something that they need as part of the work they're trying to get done. So we should try to make it as easy for them as we can to get the information that they can get in HTTP and to work with HTTP header fields without requiring them to adapt technologies that may be designed for a different user population.
Thank you, Eric. Martin?
Oh, wow. Okay. I think probably the thing that tips me towards saying that using structured fields properly here is acceptable is that the number of footguns that those casual developers have in front of them is much more than they think they have, and usability is not necessarily very different when you look at restructuring this as a single structured header. You take the hyphen and you turn it into a colon, and you take the colon and you turn it into an equal sign, and you have essentially what we were talking about using structured fields for. It's not that complicated to parse. It's certainly no more difficult to use than what Roberto has described, and we really don't want to have a situation where people think they can just, oh, we'll just throw parse in or something in here, because that's led to a number of problems that we've had in the past. And as much as I think the professional versus casual thing is important here, we want to make the casual people use the structured field parsers rather. We want everyone to be using the structured field parsers because those are the ones that are safe.
Mark?
Oh, the graph is moving. You can probably hear me now. Eric, I really don't buy it. Sorry. People who have to parse HTTP headers by hand are exactly what we want to avoid with this. And having those parameters there, like the W on the screen that just went away for some reason, is the huge kind of footgun that Martin's talking about. If you know, and frankly, making them just straight integers like this, but still structured fields, is encouraging people to write their own parsers, and then they'll break when people put on a parameter on it later. So I don't buy it. Structured fields is designed exactly so that people can just go off and use a library off the shelf and not worry about any of this. And API developers love using libraries. That's their heart and soul. So, yeah. And I actually got on cue to respond to Braun. Absolutely, if we get feedback that implementers and users prefer one thing, that's great. I'm a little concerned about one person going off and coming back and making decisions based only on that person's interaction with the community. I would expect broader input. That's all.
And speaking as an individual, Eric, I will both agree with you and disagree with you. I do agree that in your characterization of a lot of API developers, but most API developers are also not implementing the throttling infrastructure. They're going to use some kind of library. I think the people we need to convince the people writing throttling libraries, and at that point, it's the people serving the headers that are making the decisions. The consumers will use whatever they're given, and hopefully they'll use a library to go do that parsing. So I think I am concerned that it's we just don't want to change our thing that's using Xdash, and if you make things very, very different, it'll be obvious that we're not using the standard thing anymore. So I definitely would like to hear us dig in more into the pushback on making any changes and having backward compatibility. Hans?
Yeah. Hi, this is Hans-Jörg speaking. So first of all, I very much appreciate this work. So I think this is something very, very useful once it is finished and in broad use. I like Eric's distinction before regarding like there is two distinct user groups, like, you know, the casual user consuming API, maybe not wanting to spend so much effort, and more advanced users. But I slightly disagree with which of these user groups we should focus on here, because I think for the casual user, actually, this doesn't matter at all in a way, because these users will just be hard throttled by the APIs if they have no clue anyway. So this is complex stuff, actually. And people that want to implement this kind of stuff, they really need to understand not just the header fields, but also maybe the documentation behind that. So it's not just only the header fields to understand here. And I also very much agree what Daryl said. This is also something that needs to go into libraries in the end. So I think it's very much important here to have this very conceptually clear and convey as much as information that is necessary for libraries to deal with that, and yeah, to make stuff work smooth.
Bron?
Since I put my name into this for the first thing, a lot of developers are going to probably just be doing a regex that matches digits off the front of rate limit remaining and not care about anything else, would be my guess, glancing at this, realistically. And that's the use case that is going to be for a lot of people, if they care at all, or if they just throw things at it until they get a rate limit error back, which is probably what I would do. So that's the kind of thing that we're really going to see with this. If you look at what's been done in the field already, I think that's a good place to look at, because that's what has organically grown. And what's organically grown has been separate headers rather than a structured header. It's what the people who already do stuff in this space are going to be familiar with. And so, Mark, I totally see your point. Who is going to do that research? Because just saying that research needs to be done with no one volunteering to do it is the same as the work never happens.
Mark?
There it is. You can hear me. Okay. The lag is amazing. It sounds like there are two extreme solutions here, and I don't want to paint it as we have to choose A or B, but it sounds like we might be migrating towards that. And at one extreme, we have an unlimited number of fields, depending on how many pieces of data that we need to send, and each field just has an atomic piece of data, and it's not structured field, it's just 10, 6, and 3, literally, and you don't have any parameters because that's too hard. Or you have a fully structured field, and it is fairly complex, but we throw structured fields parsers at it, and the data just appears. And we have to make it complex enough to be effectively self-greasing, which I think there's probably enough data to do here if we combine it into one or two fields. If it's not self-greasing, then I think that Bron, has a point that people will just try and parse it, and then it'll break when somebody adds some data to it, like a parameter to it later on. So maybe what we need to do is to write up those two extremes and see what they look like. There seems to be some noise there. So write up those two extremes, see what they look like, and figure out what the best path forward is from there.
So I think we've chewed through the meat of the issue. I don't think we're going to solve developer motivation. I think it would be good for us to take this further conversation to the list, and maybe we can move on to the next presentation from Roberto. And his mind goes blank. Media types, yes. So there's going to be a lot of conversation on this one, I fear. Take it away, Roberto.
Hi everybody, I'm Roberto Bolli. Nice to meet you. So in this specification, we are trying to register some media types that are widely used on the internet and but are not yet registered. The goal is increasing interoperability when processing API specification, is to leverage content negotiation when exchanging API resources, and simplify cooperative development and cataloging of API and schemes. So, OpenAPI specification relies on YAML and JSON schema that are not being registered. This makes impossible content negotiation done in a standard way. And YAML users do not have interoperability and security considerations. So, we want to register YAML and plus YAML media type, providing interoperability and security consideration, foundation for OpenAPI plus YAML. Registering OpenAPI plus JSON and YAML, JSON schema plus JSON and YAML, JSON LD plus YAML. Those in green are a quick win. We already have onboarded JSON schema and OpenAPI folks. On plus YAML, there is some work needed. We onboarded YAML folks, but there is work to do. On LD plus YAML, JSON LD false agrees, but there is more work needed. And on schema plus YAML, there is some disagreement. So this is the outlook. We engaged with almost everybody at different degrees of interaction. We have these open issues. One, engage with media types mailing lists when in workgroup plus call, suggested by Francesca, thanks. Defer fragment identifier considerations. Number 22, can we use normative language in media type registration? It seems that it is possible, but I don't know, so I ask for feedback here to the work group. There are some issues in JSON LD plus YAML for a set of reasons, because JSON LD seems that use the infra specification, not only the JSON specification. And the more divisive one is, do we need the JSON schema plus YAML media type? So the changes from the first revision is that it now supports JSON schema. We added the YAML structure syntax suffix and added YAML interoperability and security consideration with some support from the YAML folks. Yes, we need this. The question from Martin. The point of JSON schema plus YAML is related to the OpenAPI world, because OpenAPI specifications are actually developed in YAML. And if I have to create a catalog with OpenAPI specification, if I want to reference JSON schema, then developers expect to develop JSON schema in YAML. Having JSON schema only in JSON means that folks develop in YAML and then add them to catalogs in JSON, so that API specification written in YAML can reference JSON schema written in JSON. And this is what is probably happening now. This is not very comfortable, very usable, because why, if I develop something in a language, I need to convert it in another syntax to be used. Moreover, for developers, JSON is less easy to use respect to YAML. But well, this was just to present the specification. I think there is a lot of work to do, especially on all the impacts that YAML has on various parts of the specification. And well, have your say. So I read that there are some ideas. I don't know if you all read the specification, but
there was one comment brought up by Martin with regards to, shouldn't that application/schema plus JSON be application/JSON schema plus JSON? Because it feels a little like squatting to call it application/schema.
Well, I just took them from JSON schema community, and I didn't want to push the toes on JSON schema community. I'm discussing with them. They will probably write the media type registration. They already did. So we are hosting the opinion of the JSON schema community for what regards the JSON schema.
Mark has joined the queue. Mark?
There it goes. All right. I have no idea why there's so much lag. So I'm not familiar with this work. The only thing that I'd caution is we've had situations like this in the past where there's a draft to do some work in the IETF that's related to a larger piece of work that lives somewhere else. and it's super easy to get our wires crossed when doing so. So I would very strongly suggest that if you're not already going through the most official liaison channel you can to do these things. In other words, just relying on people you know in those communities or chat on a list or something is probably not adequate. You need to get the most formal possible consensus or decision or whatever the mechanism the community has that they are okay with this and they want to do it this way and they want the IETF to do this. Otherwise, we can end up in a very awkward situation. So I'm not saying that anything wrong has been done or anything. I'm just, from past experience, this can bite us really hard. So we need to make sure we do that right. That's all. But thank you for doing this work, because this is the unglamorous stuff that often doesn't get done.
I just, sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
No, I was just thinking.
So I can speak to the Open API community, and the Open API community is very much behind this effort. And this, we've had numerous conversations in the technical steering committee meetings about this, so that there's definitely support there. The JSON schema community, who are also actively involved with the Open API, it is a fairly small group of people, and I know that Roberto is talking to the right people. I think we should go back to them and suggest that application/schema is a little broad, and I do think they will be receptive to that kind of feedback.
And it seems like the other communities to engage in would be the linked data community, which I know has registered media types before, and the YAML community, of course, as well.
Martin?
It's only the audio. I don't quite know. Anyway, I was going to say, my first look at this also, I was aware of its existence, but the thing that I would suggest here is that you've got a lot of media types in the one document, and one of them is this plus YAML structured syntax suffix. It might be a good idea to just slice some of these pieces off and do them as separate documents, simply because I think the slide 3 back, where you have the different color codes for the things being at risk and those ones that are simple and easy, there's a good risk that those things that are difficult holding back the other ones, and it might be nice to just get some of the easy things out of the way and published. And from a user perspective, being able to cite just the plus YAML spec when you're registering your media type would be a lot easier than trying to fish around in a big bucket of different media type registrations when you have to do something like this.
And just one other call out, in the Media Man meeting this week, there was a discussion of multiple suffixes, and because they're talking about wanting to be able to say plus LD plus JSON on top of the application/did. So I'm not sure where that's going to land, but there was some pushback in that conversation, specifically around using suffixes at all. So in reading through the issues, like early on when this was just focused on OpenAPI and JSON schema, it seemed fairly straightforward, but some of the issues seem to be opening up a bunch of stuff and sticky stuff. So maybe Martin's feedback is good, that stopping at one point and separating out some things would be a good idea. But this is an excellent conversation, and yeah, I think these media taps have been long desired by the community. So I love the fact that you're doing this work, Roberto.
Yeah, the goal was providing a specification where all actors, all media types related to the API can be addressed, because I think that we need to, at least to me, it has been beneficial to get in touch with all those community together to have a better overview of the relations that there are, even when people uses them, between all those media types. Martin, there is a note. We don't even have the YAML media type, so application YAML is not registered now. So we are registering both application YAML and the structured syntax suffix plus YAML. So if you are interested in, Martin, in this YAML stuff, probably we can fork this document and work on the YAML stuff together in the same proposal. Okay, so I think okay, we have a volunteer, Eric.
Yeah. The silence was long enough that somebody felt they should step up. That's excellent.
So we will try to separate those documents and hopefully having the YAML registration moving on. But before doing this, I think I asked the chairs if we can get some feedback from the media man.
Sure, and it's Manu who you have been working with on this document, who's involved in the multiple suffixes effort.
Manu Sporni?
Yeah. So again,
Okay.
you're talking to the right people there. Okay, thank you, Roberto.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for yours.
So we have another presentation from Martin. Before we go there, I just want to quickly go through the set of open issues on and some status across all of the documentation. And I'm going to be brave, Rich, and actually try and share my screen here. Do you really want to share your screen? Yes. Do I want to share this screen? Yes. And as this working group is, from what I understand, a little unusual in that we have so many documents going through, in order to try and keep track of all of the different things that are going on, because most of them are going on GitHub, I attempted to take advantage of the new beta project boards in GitHub. And so if you go to the organization of the Git repo, you should see there's a projects tab at the top, and then there is at the moment just one project. You can set up as many of these as you like, and when you are working with an issue, so I'm just going to click on this to open it. There is this projects category here, and so you can simply say, this particular issue we're working on, I want to show it on the project board, and you can specify a status, and as soon as you connect it here, it will magically appear on the project board, and we've set it up so that it groups by repo, so we can see the open items for the deprecation header, the item potency key, media type, straight limits, and HTTP problem.
One quick clarifying question.
Yes.
So, since we have a repo for document, the document authors can click on the add it to the project, and it will automatically show up in this master list.
I am still getting all of the wrinkles out of the permissioning. My
Sure.
understanding is if you have write permissions on a repo, you can assign it to the project.
Okay, so we might need to tweak some things, but great. This doesn't require one person to do a master list. It requires, the individual people can do it. That's awesome.
Correct. What the interesting thing is, this status here in this column is independent of the issue. We can actually add new fields to the project, so that there is additional metadata that can be controlled at the project level. So these statuses are independent of the status of the individual issue. And then so in reviewing some of these, I created these statuses to distinguish between the ones we're still having debates about and the ones that we seem to have resolved the discussion, and it's just a case of the authors needing to go and do a document update. I think one mechanism we could use here in processes is where we have things that say, there's a document update required. It would probably be good if we had somebody assigned to actually do that document update. And you can see here, in the case of this one, there is actually a PR that has been linked to this one. So it's fairly easy to dig down into these items. And so if you have been given permission to this project, there's another view that I set up, which is more kind of like a Kanban board, and you can just drag and drop between here. But because this is changing the status that is owned by the project, you need write permissions on the organizational project. So this will be a thing that hopefully evolves to be more effective over time. Mark?
Is it working?
Yes, we can see you now.
Okay. It asked for permissions yet again. That just made a question occur to me. Is the expectation from the chairs that document editors will respect the categorizations that you've given them there? So, for example, I went through and did a couple of PRs for issues in the 7807 BIS today that appear to have consensus. Should we wait for you to change the status to document update required before you merge them? Are you overseeing it to that level, or is this just entirely kind of best effort informational? What's the stance there?
I mean, that's a conversation to be had. Like, the least work we have to do, the better. But I'm more than happy to go and kind of reconcile. I think if we want to use this as a way for document editors to communicate with chairs that this is the status of where we are up to, then I'm more than happy that document editors have right access on this project and can change these things themselves.
Okay, so I just wanted to understand whether the status was, exclusively controlled by the chairs or shared with the editors, or just kind of a best effort-y sort of thing. It sounds like it's more the latter than the former.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, as you saw from Roberto's deck, like, he had a slide that had a bunch of issues that were open to talk about it, and we did that in the last IETF meeting, and this is just kind of like, hey, here's an easy way of keeping that kind of list of here are the active things that we're talking about up to date.
Okay.
It was unfortunate. I don't seem to be able to find a way of actually getting the issue number to appear as a column, but if you hover over, you see in the bottom left-hand corner the issue number. And I will note, Roberto, that you called out in your rate limit headers an issue number 41, and I can't find issue number 41 in the repo, or at least Fish 41 had a very different title than the one that you called out. So we should reconcile that.
Yes.
Yes, agreed, Eric. This is additional. This is a status view with hopefully an absolute minimum amount of additional work. And we could, if we decide, we could just completely throw away the status column and just use labels. And we could use labels as a way for document authors to just put a label on an issue and be able to surface that up at the central place. And because you can see over here whether an issue has actually been closed or is still open. How easy is it to share labels? No, you have to reinvent the labels. Yeah.
I used to create things, takes the standard, quote unquote, standard set of labels.
You're a little quiet, Rich.
Yeah, sorry about that. So the script I use to create the repos when we have a new document just copies a standard set of labels that came from, Mark's and Martin's first thing, using the quick group. So yeah, there's no way to say these are labels for across a whole organization, but it's automated. It's not terribly difficult.
Okay. So that was
And
the
Mark,
main thing I want. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Mark points out it's possible to create default set of labels for new repositories, which would be presumably very, pardon me, very useful for this group. Is our goal is to get many documents through. So I'll take a look at that.
Cool. Just in an attempt to use this for a moment, there is still active work going on in deprecation header. There's some items here. There is a couple of items still in discussion, so please, I encourage you to go check out these issues on the GitHub repo and provide feedback. I debated whether or not to create this block. This is related to using date time, and there was a reference to other ongoing work with regards to what is the appropriate use of a date time versus just a delta seconds. As I say, we can evolve these statuses. The item potency header has expired. We should follow up with Sanjay as to whether this is going to come back to life, or we should encourage Sanjay to bring this back to life. And we discussed those two, and 7807, again, some open items for discussion. And with that, oh, I see somebody in the queue. Eric.
Yep. Hello. Thanks. This is Eric. Yeah, just with regard to the item potency, I think that was not kind of intentional, so to speak, that it expired. The idea was not to say we're not doing that anymore. It's just that there are a couple of open issues that should be addressed. I don't think we have a good plan sort of on which of these issues should be addressed before we create a new version. But at least the intention definitely is to keep this alive, even though it is formally expired. So I think we should definitely keep it in there, and hopefully this one will have a new version in the not too distant future. Thank you.
It would be good to get confirmation, because I read through some of these issues, and it looked very much like there was a suggestion, and the response was yes, we should update that in the document. So those felt like
some of the things
were...
that you put there, it's like, okay, somebody should be assigned to it so that we know who to go back to, and these, yeah, good. But I think like your table there really is also, it's just great for housekeeping, right? Like making sure that, well, we're discussing many things, but nobody is responsible. Maybe that's not a good sign.
Mark?
Yeah. Okay. I should really unmute in anticipation, I guess. Do I may have misunderstood the agenda. Do we have time to actually briefly run through the 7807 issues? Because I think that would actually help us move the document forward.
I believe we can. The primary item left on the agenda is Martin's date request, but we have 50
I don't think it's going to take very
so
long.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's...
Yeah. Okay. So I'll use the numbers on the left, even though we know that they're not the real numbers. The number 21, mapping problem details into a header. I suggested that just as kind of a thought experiment, because it has come up in the past before of conveying this information in a header when you don't have access to write into the response body for whatever reason. Or if you want to expose this information to an intermediary that doesn't want to crack the body open. I should say content, I shouldn't say body, but old school. And it seems to me like the response to this was somewhat lukewarm. So on the one hand, a lukewarm response like this, I think if I could characterize the responses I've seen is that, oh yeah, that might be useful, but I don't really have an immediate use for it now. So the most obvious thing to do would be to drop it and just move on. I think if you look at the very last comment, I said, if people think that they have a clear use for this or that it might be useful very soon, we should do it while we have the document open, because it's just easier to do that. Otherwise, we can wait on it, knowing that, if there is pressure to use it out there, then that'll build up for a while until we actually publish the document, which we experienced for a lot of other API facilities as well. So I don't have strong feelings about this. I'm happy to drop it if no one wants to fight for it. I just was curious to see what other people thought about it. I guess last call for including this into the spec.
I thought it was a really interesting possibility to address the topic that has come up multiple times before, which is this ability to include warnings. It depends on how fatal you perceive the word problem. Because we
I have
haven't
small
managed
problems.
to
I
find
have big problems.
That's right. That's a small problem you might consider a warning. So I think that would be a really nice thing to be able to just say, yes, I want to add a header to indicate there is some kind of problem with this response, even though I returned it to you with a 200 OK.
I mean, I'm happy to do a PR just to see what it looks like. I mean, my inclination would be if it's a huge wall of text, it's not worth it. But if we can get a couple of paragraphs and get some value out of it, I'm happy to put it out there and then see if that spurs anyone to say, yes, I'd really like to have that. Does that make sense?
Does to me.
I'm also equally happy to close it with no action. People in the queue?
Nobody has opinions.
No, there are people in the queue.
I think it can have some value.
So not sure about the queue, but I think it's my turn, right? So yeah, this is Hans-Jörg again. Yeah, I would actually second. I think it might be useful for warning kind of style. So I would argue for keeping it in.
Okay, that's actually really helpful. I'm happy to do a PR and just see what it looks like, and it may very well be that reveals that it's a horrible idea or horribly complex and not worth the effort or whatever. But I'm willing to try, so I'll give it a go. Next issue. Thank you, Hans. That was helpful, and Roberto. Down. Thank you. Requiring a specification document, I think that is just a mechanical thing about the registration policy. I copied for the registry of problem types, and I copied some text from elsewhere that wasn't appropriate, and this is a correction of that. So there's a PR there if anybody wants to look at it. I intend to merge that very soon. Excuse me. The next one, number quote-unquote 23, multiple problems. This has been a long discussion, and I think we have a fairly strong agreement, at least in the issue and in the discussions we've had previously in working group sessions, on a path forward in terms of deleting some text about status code 207 that is not terribly good practice, and putting in another kind of warning about the limitations of this structure. Sanjay was, I know, a bit sad about removing the examples that he'd put the work into, or at least one of the examples that he'd put the work into adding to the spec. But I think that there's a fairly strong agreement there. So if folks want to look at that PR, and give any feedback, I again intend to merge that pretty soon as well. Okay. And if folks have comments about that right now, I'm happy to chat about
it. I had posed a question as to, this question about putting examples into the spec, but actually not putting, is a best practices document like the next logical conclusion there? Or is that overkill?
A best practices document for 7807?
Yeah. To include all of these examples of, well, this is how you do multiple problem types, and this is how you use it for warnings, and this is how you...
I would hope that kind of documentation, in the first instance, you'd put it into some of the... whether a blog or some sort of industry communication or something. I think there are a number of outlets out there like that, and if there aren't, there should be. You kind of smashing mag, but for API developers or whatever. If anybody goes and does that, I expect a cut. Just saying. Yeah, and if we can, there's a line to be walked there, but I think that would be my response for now. Yeah. Hans, do you have your hand up for this, or is that just a... No. Okay. Extension to show source of problem in a request for XX class of errors. That is actually blocked by another issue, which isn't on this listing for some reason.
Ooh, okay. Let's see if we can fix that. Apparently, when I share my screen, things go a lot slower. Is the issue that's blocking it discussed here? Mentioned?
At the bottom, it should be, yes, 36, that one right there, which was just opened recently. Maybe that's why.
There we go.
So we've had this latent problem in a lot of the discussions about 7807, and it's good. I'm actually glad that this was opened as a separate issue, so we can just discuss it separately. And it's that the 7807 does not allow new standard what's the word I'm looking for? Properties, members, whatever, to be added to the structure. that all the ones that aren't in 7807 are effectively, any possible name is under control of the problem type. So, we can't come up and say, well, here's a new member for, I don't know, for a pointer to where the problem is in the response body, for example, which is what the previous issue was about. And so if you scroll all the way down, I think that we have a couple of ways out of this. We can either, zero, which I didn't put into this message, is the status quo, which is don't say anything about this. Or we could find a naming convention for new standard properties that doesn't conflict with any existing usage. So, for example, add a prefix to new standard properties. And the issue with that is that we, by nature, can't know all of the usage of 7807 around the world, and that we won't conflict with them in every single instance. We can make that less likely by choosing a weird prefix, and then, of course, we have weird, ugly prefixes on new standard properties, but whatever. But that's kind of like there's a risk strategy to be had around if we take that path. The other path we have is to mint a new media type for problem details for this next revision. And the concern there, that gives us a clean slate to work with. But of course, that also risks creating fragmentation, that now API developers have to choose which one they use, and there's momentum behind the old one, and but I have to use this new thing, but I don't know if everybody supports it, blah, 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 blah. And so that creates more confusion potentially. There is a third option, and that's kind of the unspoken option in 7807, which is we can't define new standard, this is recognized in every problem instance across the world. But what we can do is create new conventions that new problem types or any problem types can opt into and say, oh, yes, I use that convention. So, for example, we could create a convention that there's a problem pointer and it means something when the type says it means something. Not quite as automatic and nice as you'd like, but maybe a path forward without breaking too much. I don't have any strong feelings here personally, if you want to call that option 0, 1, 2, and 3. But I kind of feel like I'm most against option 2. I think minting a new media type, there should be a fairly high bar against it. And I think option 1 actually probably could work. My only concern there is there's a lot of experiments that people want to have, I think, about, that's a good idea, this is a good idea, and we should have a chat about what the bar is for new for new standard attributes. I don't think we should just put them out there willy-nilly. But that's all I have to say about this. I'm really curious to hear what other folks have to say about it.
Eric?
Yes, thanks. This is Eric. Thanks, Mark, for coming up with these suggestions. For number 1, I think, we have the typical problem, like this good old X dash considered harmful, right? It's like once people start using stuff, then it's kind of, that's how it is. And renaming it to whatever convention we come up with is always a little bit hard. But I think my preference probably would be number 1, only that maybe we could consider using URIs, which, why not? It's kind of like a prefix, but one that maybe is a little less just random. But anyway, the second one also to me is not so attractive. The third one, actually, I have my problem with that is that this means that kind of each type would need to kind of opt in individually. And I think in many cases, you might rather have a situation where you say, my API always uses these fields, and then it would become kind of complicated to say, well, and I have these 28 types, and then all these 28 types, so to speak, would need to opt in into that additional field that you're trying to use. So I think that one is like, it doesn't scale so well, I think. So I think my preference would be to go with number 1 and to go with the URI, some kind of URI as a prefix. And then I think the risk of conflicts is relatively low. And that's, well, given what RFC 7807 already does, I think that's maybe the best thing that we can pick
I think I agree with you on most things there. I think for me the problem with the third option is that tools want to be able to automatically, invoke those semantics without recognizing a particular problem type, and then you can offer richer, handling of a problem without having to know its particular semantics. And if it's opt-in like that, then that implies that we'd need some sort of problem type description format to enable tools to process that, which is kind of nasty. And frankly, we know it's not going to happen. What they'll do is just say, oh, look, it's using problem pointer. I reckon it probably means that, even though I don't know for sure. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that number one is probably the right way to go. I do have kind of this visceral reaction to using URIs as JSON property names. I think that some developers are absolutely fine with that, especially if they are of the linked data world, and other developers are going to look at that and say, well, I'm not going to use that then. And I'd like to avoid that reaction personally. I'd rather find, I don't know, some people use a $sign, I don't know, double colon. We can have that bike shitting exercise later on.
This is Daryl. Just one comment on the third option. As the 7807 biz introduces a JSON schema, I think what the third option is describing is what JSON schema now allows with vocabularies and dialects. And because this is almost exactly what we did in OpenAPI, in order to extend the keywords that are supported, we introduced a vocabulary, and then you declare that we are using this dialect, which is a set of vocabularies. So there may be some mechanics. It's a little interesting to get your head around, but there may be some mechanics that we could reuse, but it is somewhat dependent on how well adoption of dialects and vocabs comes, because it's fairly new in JSON schema.
So if I can respond, oh, is it working now? Fantastic. It's telling me that it's success. Big green box. That's great. I have, again, a kind of a visceral reaction to that. It's very similar to the linked data world, where they're like, to me, the whole idea there is, well, we've got this data model that we overlay on top of JSON, but it looks like normal JSON, and that's kind of an attractive nuisance, because a developer who doesn't use linked data will come along and say, oh, look, it's JSON, but if they don't use that data model, they might actually really mess things up. And so when you overlay these data models on top of really attractive native data models, and processing models and so forth, it becomes tricky for everyday developers to use it. And so I'm a little wary of those sorts of things. I think it should behave like it looks,
Yep. Okay. Plenty of meaty issues. Do you have anything to say about JSON? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So it sounds like there's maybe some convergence on the number one with a tremendous bike shit to build. If I can characterize that one. Yeah. Okay.
To
so that one
or not to Xdash?
Oh, don't start me on that. So that actually, the number 24 is dependent upon that number 26. If we get the number 26 sorted out, then there's just a question of whether or not we actually do that, and we'll get there then. JSON LD context. Personally, I won't use it, but I know that other people want to. I don't know that it's harmful to add to the spec, so I've just asked for people to make a proposal, and we're waiting for that, for someone to make a PR of what text actually needs to appear in the spec. So if somebody wants to go off and do that work, that's great. If nobody does it by the time that we get a last call, I think we'll probably just drop this issue. But I'm hoping Ashbourne or somebody will step up. And I think that's everything for this. So thank you. Thanks for the time.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so if I remember the agenda well enough, I believe next up is Martin.
You're gonna have to do the thing with the slides.
Yeah, sorry, just had to fix my.
Oh, no, you don't have to do it. Yeah, if you're fine to do that. I was requesting it. That's cool. Now I'm going to have to say things like, next slide, please.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, sure. Say next slide. Hell.
I did say that. I think the title slide is useless. All right, so this is something that's come up in the OHI working group as well. It seems that we're running into a bunch of issues with the use of HTTP that are kind of interesting and sort of break into new ground. One of the things there that we've discovered is that there's some use for having the ability to mark the time of a request, particularly in that case for dealing with anti-replay, as I'll get into later. But there's a general class of things where you put the current time into a request or something like that, so that you limit the time over which something. Oh, that's a nice feature. Someone spent a lot of time on that. I can move the slides now. So the purpose of this draft is to basically explore the use of putting the current time in a request and all of the hazards that necessarily come with that, moral and otherwise, with the purpose of trying to make date timestamps in requests work a little better. So the specific problem that we have in OHI is that requests are replayable in that context, which is not particularly good. And so having a replay strategy is particularly useful. And in order to manage the state commitments on servers that are doing anti-replay, you probably want to have something like a date or sequence number or some sort of monotonically increasing thing. Date is kind of okay. Having a date means that if you receive a request that's been replayed, you can rapidly identify it as such and then just out of hand reject it. And then for those requests that are within a certain window of the current time, you can simply say, well, I'll accept those and remember some other details of the request, so that if another one with the same details comes in again, you can quickly reject it as a duplicate. Without the date, there's basically an infinite state problem that the server has to deal with. So primarily looking at date, but there are other timestamps in requests. So probably the biggest part of the document talks about the bad clock problem. So shockingly common that clients and servers have a disagreement about what time it is. It's quite often the case that clients are very, very badly wrong. We've seen times that are in the wrong millennium, and it's not that unusual to see things that are months or years out of date. So having a means to correct that is interesting. There's a scheme that's suggested in the document that simply says take the date from the response and try again. Of course, using an untrusted time from an arbitrary server, random servers on the internet, is probably unwise. Talk about that a little bit as well. Talk about the caching interactions and some of the things that might happen if you have an intermediary in the path. It's quite common for things like CDNs to overwrite the date on the expectation that the CDN knows what time it is. They often take extra care in ensuring that they have good clocks, but the servers that back them don't often get the time right. So CDNs often fix it up for you. The implication there is generally that this is no problem, but if the server time is very, very badly wrong and it's rejecting requests, and the CDN is fixing the dates up on the way out, it could mean that you never get a request through, ever. So I know we had some discussion with this one already. The questions I have is, do people find this material useful? And is this something that the group would be interested in working on? He says expectantly. Oh, Mark tells me I'm wrong about why the CDNs rewrite the date. I bet they rewrite it for all sorts of scary caching reasons. Jonathan asks in chat, is there an error description for I need a date, but you didn't include one? Yes. So part of what this document has is a problem report type that says your date was wrong, which includes your date was absent.
So, how straightforward and short is this document, do you think, Martin?
It's about 5 pages from memory. I don't do pages anymore, so I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's 8. It's not a particularly long one. Yeah, I don't do pages anymore. It's probably 5.
Screenfuls would have been enough. But that's fine.
Yeah. No, Mark's in the queue.
Yeah.
Dang, I'm still talking to. Okay, good. So I think maybe the focus of the discussion here should be on, if this document just needs a home, I'm sure that OHI could do it. I'm sure that HTTP would probably be happy to do it as well. I think maybe the focus of the way to make this discussion useful is do API folks think that having this document and these clarifications in this problem type would be useful for API consumers and API designers? And if so, then this is a natural home for it. And if it's a little more scratching your head, I'm not so sure, we can probably just do it in HTTP or in OHI or wherever. And if it gets use elsewhere, that's great. But it's not, necessary to have it here. That's how I'd think about it personally. I don't know the answer. That's just how I'd frame the question.
Yeah, I think when I first floated this one, I don't know if it was you, Mark, who pointed out the idempotency key work, and there's a bit of relationship with that one. They're sort of complementary pieces of work.
Right, I remember that now. That's right, yeah.
Just go ahead, Robert. Just speak up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. I think it's okay, the documents to be related to timestamps in general, but I really don't want to mess with date because, and I'm not even sure that this is the right place where information that should be in some way guaranteed should be used, but this is a personal opinion. This is my opinion for signatures and for and in general for whatever is related to either confidentiality, integrity, or that is not just an operative information. That's it.
So I think that's a fair comment. I didn't quite catch your piece about the date.
I would just say the document should be named timestamp information instead of date, because we are speaking in general about timestamp, right?
Yeah, it's possibly not even HTTP specific apart from the problem type work.
Right.
Yeah, I'll make that change. Easy.
I think this is Daryl speaking from an API perspective. I haven't seen this particular issue come up a whole lot, although I can imagine for APIs that require to do signed requests, this does get a lot more interesting. And I think just the fact that we're using, and it does include a problem type as a way of describing it, does kind of correlate it back to APIs fairly strongly. So I think it does seem like a reasonable home for adding this capability, even though maybe at the moment in the API world it's fairly niche. Mark?
Is it working? Okay. That makes me wonder whether, have you talked to Justin about this? Because if it's, has a strong link to the signatures draft, maybe it could go in there or be a companion document, or just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to Justin about this one. In the discussion I had with Roberto on the list, I think we kind of concluded that the signatures thing was less directly applicable to this one. It's often the case that when something signs something, they put the time at which they signed it, but the purpose of that is usage limitation rather than to indicate the current time, and so the connection to signatures is a little weaker than that. So I don't want to overemphasize the application to signatures. Okay, well, I've gotten some good feedback here. Perhaps I've got to take this to the list, and I've got a revision to make. There's a few things that have come up already in the discussions thus far. I might revise it and then ask to get on the list, and we can have that discussion if the chairs don't object.
Just from the perspective of this working group, I have a small worry that it might interfere with or have a distracting kind of element with the idempotency key work. I'm not sure it would be a, I guess I'm wondering out loud whether they would resonate with each other or whether they would pull apart from each other. I'm not sure.
My read of the idempotency stuff is that this is complementary, entirely complementary. You can use both or neither or one, and that's going to work out pretty well, depending on what it is that you're looking to do. So I think this is probably okay for that. One of the nice things about the idempotency work is that it gives a clear way to signal what aspects of the request can determine that it is idempotent or not, which is sort of very complementary if you're talking about anti-replay strategies and whatnot. Because if you've got an idempotent request, then you don't have to worry as much about the replay properties of something. So I thought they were very much complementary.
All right, so you'll make some changes, then bring it to the list, and maybe we'll discuss adoption, or you can continue to menu shop.
I would never say that.
No. Finding the most appropriate home for this useful work. I'm sorry, I said it too terse.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah. All right. Are we in the AOB section now, Daryl?
We are in the proposal for new working group documents, which we are now more enthusiastically open to. I believe we had last time a conversation about link template as a document to do a call for adoption on list, which I believe we failed to do. And so we are recommitted this time. We really will do call for adoption, and we have more renewed enthusiasm about adopting more docs. So look out for that on the mailing list. And the other document that has been brought up in the discussions area on the GitHub repo is the health check document, which is, as I understand it, is currently an individual contribution, but doesn't have a working group home. And I'm going to defer to Rich, with regards to what the processes and procedures of adopting something like that would be?
We can adopt it. You know, the author would presumably want to have that adopted. Eric, you can speak in a sec. The process is it's not a big deal. It's the same as any other adoption.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. This is Eric. I just wanted so because last time I said I would get in touch with Irakli and see, you know, how he feels about it and so forth. And in my defense, I did multiple times, but not much progress was being made. So I still have, I don't know, last thing I heard from him was like that he tried to join the mailing list, and I'm not quite sure how the status is there. I don't think I've seen him on the mailing list, but at least I'm still pinging him on a regular basis. I'll keep doing that, and hopefully there will be some path forward. I'm not quite sure whether Irakli has the cycles to actually go forward with the draft, but one way or the other, at least he knows that the group is interested in the general topic, and I'll keep the group updated if I make any progress.
Great. Okay. Thank you. If it helps to, you know, loop Daryl or I into the conversation, we can help ensure the process will be relatively painless until it gets to, as folks know, after working.
No, that's not the limiting factor right now.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay, so I think that leaves us with AOB.
Great. Go ahead, Francesca.
Hello. I wanted to ask the chairs and the working group to possibly consider updating the milestones. We don't need to have, I think it's useful to have some sort of record of, you know, what's the current status of the documents, even though we have an awesome GitHub project view now, but this is a more high-level general view. And we can use the next and later and last instead of dates if, you know, the working group prefers, but also having an idea of what our goals times are could be useful. We don't have to like be super precise, but yeah, it would help me. So I want to bring this up. Right now we have no milestones.
Got it. Okay. Martin, go ahead, and then I'll say something.
Man, that's so slow. Chairs have done the research on milestones and concluded that having dates on them is probably foolish. We should probably decide whether we want to put a date on any milestones in this group as well. I'd sort of advocate for saying no.
Yeah, I think yes, having some kind of priority or a rough, you know, T-shirt size estimate will be worthwhile. Daryl, Mark, and I can discuss offline with Francesca and post them, and then see if the working group says we got it wrong. So we'll do that between now and the next IETF. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay. You want to mention the Twitter thing, Daryl?
Yes, Rich and I discussed that there was the possibility of setting up a Twitter bot in order to provide more feedback to the community and some more visibility. I suggested that I think Twitter is actually quite a common gathering spot for API community folk. And so if we want to get the attention of more people, I think that probably would be a good idea. So I guess it's just a case of understanding exactly what events we would want, so that we understand what kind of frequency that might spam a audience with notifications. See. Okay. Eric, you say you like the HTTP working group one. Do folks have pointers as to how to get that set up?
There we go.
Yeah.
That was a straight line, Mark.
Sorry, we may run out of time before my mic becomes active again. Yeah, you talk to me. I have
Okay.
a bot that does that. If you have new features, I take pull requests or cache. So
Like cache with a date stamp on it, or CASH? Sorry. All right.
Okay. I will talk to you, Mark.
Cool.
Great. Yeah, I think adoption is definitely one we want to put in the list too, because we want to know people. Right. We want to tell not just end of the process, but the beginning of the process.
Yeah, the hard one right now is when you put out a call for adoption, because there's no way to recognize that easily with the event stream the data tracker puts out. But we'll talk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can. Maybe we can get a tools to change made. Okay. All right. Unless anybody has something else to bring up, I think we'll give everybody.
Link set.
Thank you.
Francesca suggested we do an update on that.
Yeah.
Save
Okay.
the best for last.
Save the best for last. Thanks the authors for their patience and good nature. Yes, there was one change made in the last, good point. One change made after the set of ISG and IETF reviews, which turned two shoulds into a may, two shoulds into a must, sorry, for interop. I'll post the diff to the list, and if anybody disagrees by the end of next week, speak up. But it's just tightening a requirement that says you have to do this particular thing because it's really required for interoperability, so therefore it should be a must.
So I don't know if Eric wants to share more in detail, but since I'm shepherding this through the ISG process, I can say that, yeah, just for summary, if someone, if people haven't followed this, but we had to do another IETF last call because of process, because some downref were missed that were in the ICE. So we started that, and it's ending the 28th of March. And I also requested an internationalization directorate review, so I hope that will arrive by then. And after that, we're only missing a couple of ballots, and I don't think that it will be a huge re-review from the whole ISG. And I wanted to thank you, the authors, for answering all the comments, and they already posted a next version 09. So it should be quite painless, in my opinion. I'm only waiting for the internationalization review to make sure that we get that right. I am not an expert in the topic, so waiting for their opinion, since there is an internationalization section. So yeah, that's basically from my side.
Okay, so I'll post the note to the list and also make it, if you object, respond by the 28th so that the same deadline applies everywhere. And we will get this one in the queue.
Yeah, and it's up for telechat on the 7th of April to get the last ballots that are missing.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. I want to say that, this was sort of a different group for the IETF. I'm very impressed by all the authors when they go out and they say, oh, I spoke to the Open API people. I spoke to the YAML people. These are whole communities that are certainly new to me as an IETF geek, but I think we're doing a very good job. I think we're bridging appropriate communities and getting good stuff done. Sometimes when East meets West, there's a little friction and frustration, so I appreciate everybody's patience. Eric and Herbert in particular, most recently. But we seem to be doing well, and that's partly why, that's mainly why Daryl and I think we can sort of open up the pipe and take on more bandwidth. So stay safe, healthy, pray for peace, whatever.
Thank you,
Francesca,
everybody, for joining.
anything else? All right. And hopefully in the future, we'll all be able to be in the room there in the upper left corner. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you to
No.
the chairs. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you, Roberto. You're doing a great job. Appreciate everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.